Union added to that yesterday, and so we are looking at every way to limit Gaddafi's ability to rearm and supply himself with military means as well as financially to reduce his ability to continue to attack his people.
We can speak now to our Washington correspondent, Patty Calhoun. So, Patty's talking there about the measures to squeeze him militarily, but also I understand that there are assets being moved into the area. How significant is that?
Well, we don't know exactly what these assets are going to do. What the Navy's telling me is they want to make sure that they have them there just in case. They could be used for humanitarian relief, or if an aircraft carrier, which I believe is probably on the way, is used, it would obviously be used for a no-fly zone. So those are a couple of the options that they want to have, but so far there are no actual concrete plans to use those assets.
How much appetite is there in the US for that no-fly zone that others have been talking about?
You know, I think when you talk about the bloodshed and if you really explain the carnage to the American people who have been watching it very closely, I don't think that you would see any sort of criticism of the Obama administration, especially if it's done with a united front with the international community. You haven't really heard that, at least not yet.
So the moves that have been put in place so far, is it surprising that they got that kind of level of engagement so quickly?
Well, I don't know. They like to say that it's happened, you know, with record speed. They don't want to point out that it took the Obama administration 9 days to speak out against Gaddafi. They say that's because they wanted to make sure the American citizens were out of Libya before they did that. You know, and there is some question about this aid. As you know, the Secretary came out, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, and said we're going to send $10 million in aid. And what they're doing right now is they're trying to focus on getting it to the borders of Tunisia and Egypt. They're going to send teams there. But the question is, that's aid for the refugees. They've talked a lot about getting aid to the Libyan people, but how are you going to do that, especially in these towns that are now been circled by the by Gaddafi loyalists? Are they going to consider airdrops? That obviously that's a possibility. I raised that with the White House today, and so far they say they don't have anything on that. I don't know if they're even talking about it right now.
And just to go back to the issue of the no-fly zone, I mean, is there kind of some reluctance within government circles because of previous experience in the past with no-fly zones?
Well, I think there is quite a bit of reluctance for a couple of reasons. Obviously, it's very time-consuming. There's also a sense that if they conduct this no-fly zone, then NATO would be taking ownership of what comes next in Libya. And you've heard that quite a bit, especially from the Secretary of State, saying Libya is not like Egypt. There are no institutions that are there to take over if Colonel Gaddafi leaves. So there is a concern about NATO taking ownership of this crisis. Obviously, a no-fly zone would be the first step. And after that, you ask, do you put troops on the ground? Do you put UN peacekeepers? Do you put NATO forces in? So obviously, once you take that step, there is a concern about what steps you have to take after that.
OK, Patty, thank you very much indeed. Patty Calhoun, live in Washington. To Zimbabwe now, where anti-government protesters have called on people to join a million-citizen march demanding that President Robert Mugabe step down. But few appear to have turned out. In recent days, more than 40 opposition activists who met to discuss the uprisings in North Africa have been arrested and charged with treason. Jonah Hull reports from South Africa.
Munyaradzi Gwizai is a former opposition member of Zimbabwe's parliament and the man who convened a meeting last Saturday in Harare to discuss the uprisings in North Africa. Gwizai and 45 others were arrested, allegedly tortured. They now face a charge of treason that carries the death penalty.
He obviously would like another government to rule the country, so that's not a secret. But I think, yeah, these are intellectuals, these are community workers, these are not people that are any threat. So this is it's paranoia, it's simple paranoia.
With Gwizai and his fellow alleged plotters behind bars, President Robert Mugabe celebrated his 87th birthday in traditional style. In this, his 31st year in power, not many Zimbabweans are celebrating. Some talk quietly of insurrection, but with past elections marred by violence and so many among the youth and educated middle classes having fled, it's unclear where change will come from. Perhaps from outside. The owner of a leading newspaper in neighbouring South Africa is Zimbabwean Trevor Nkube. In a recent editorial, he called on Zimbabweans to become their own liberators.
Welcome. There comes a time when that fear that plays at the back of your mind faces the reality of your oppression, and you cross the line and you say, yes, these are the possibilities that might be visited upon me. But I, as a human being, deserve a better life.
Here in South Africa, where Zimbabweans have come to find work or safety in their many hundreds of thousands, there's fairly open talk about what events up north could mean for Zimbabwe. But it's talk in small pockets, far from home, without cohesion or momentum. An email doing the rounds inside and outside Zimbabwe calls for a million-citizen march in Harare on Tuesday. It's linked to a Facebook page which only has about 230 members. What could be a sign of online activism is instead greeted with skepticism. Some believe it's the work of the security services, designed to lure activists onto the streets to be arrested. It's the sort of suspicion, laced with fear, that makes any substantial challenge to Mugabe's rule seem unlikely for now. Jonah Hull, AlJazeera, Johannesburg.
Police in the Democratic Republic of Congo have arrested more than 30 people after an attempted coup. Up to 60 armed men attacked the president's house on Sunday, killing 7 people. Leader Joseph Kabila wasn't at home at the time. Fighting spread to a nearby army base before the Republican Guard put down the attack. In India, 11 people have been sentenced to death for an arson attack which left dozens dead and led to big riots. Another 20 people have been jailed for life. 59 passengers, most of them Hindu, died in the 2002 train fire in Gujarat state. Politicians blamed Muslims, sparking riots that left up to 2,000 people dead. All the suspects are Muslim, and some relatives say they were set up for political reasons. Staying in India, the latest population census is trying to put an accurate figure on the number of homeless people in the country. But as Brenna Suri reports, critics say that the survey has no chance of recording the real number of street people.
This is how India is trying to identify its homeless. Late into the night, government employees quiz this girl about what she does, who's in her family, and which god she believes in. Once they tick all the boxes, the information will then be used to assess her most pressing needs. It's an ambitious task, and it's happening as the country's census comes to a close. We've kept the homeless on the last day as we don't want to replicate data. They frequently move, so we wanted an accurate figure. Hari's lived his entire life on the streets of New Delhi and sells balloons for a living. He's been asked these questions many times in the past, but has life changed for him?
They've come here before, but what's the point? I still can't send my kids to school or get a decent job.
Nobody really knows how many homeless there are in India. Figures are sketchy and unreliable. And with no identification papers, children can't go to schools, and families can't claim welfare benefits. The point of this exercise is to include every homeless person in this country, and government officials are conducting simultaneous exercises all across India. And the time that they have to complete this is literally 2 days. So, not everyone's been counted. Across the city in a different area, this activist says officials have not counted large numbers of people.
This is a total mockery of a statutory provision. Census gives you the real